I am California of the past.
I am California of the past.
I
am California of the past.
Hello, my name is Joe Romero, and I thought I'd participate in sharing my story about California's past because I believe that my story is truly a story of Pomona. For you see, I was born and raised in Pomona in 1955, but my roots go farther than that because I'm a direct descendant of Ricardo Vejar, the original Mexican land grantee of this entire valley. I'm proud to say that my ancestors also are true Californians and go back to the founding of Los Angeles and Santa Barbara and also the missions. My story really centers around the Pomona Police Department and 33 years of service to this community. I started out as an Explorer Scout when I was at Marshall Junior High School. The principal back then was a guy named Jack Housen, and he believed in getting his students involved in various activities. My brother, Mike, who's 1 year younger than me, was already a member of the Explorer Post. It was being advised by then Sergeant Jack Blair and Lieutenant Vernon Wiegand, who would eventually go on to be a council member for the city of Pomona. But back then, they had an incentive program, and each Explorer qualified for Explorer of the Month by bringing in a new member. So unbeknownst to me, my brother invited me down to attend a meeting, and that led to going on a ride-along. And a ride-along is where the explorers got to sit in a police car, travel around town, answering calls and seeing what was going on in the world of police work. I originally wanted to be a lawyer, but that one ride-along changed my life forever. Sort of as they say, history would be made. We went on one of the calls was simply stopping to help a motorist who I believe had a flat tire or had broken down. And just watching the interaction of the police officer and the motorist changed my life. I wanted to have that same impact. And I worked my entire life as a teenager to do that, because one of the things explorers have to do is make sure that they stay in school, get good grades, become role models, good citizens. I attended Ganesha High School and was fortunate enough to spend 4 years in the Explorer program and ended my Explorer career, so to speak, as Explorer Captain. And then there were sort of the wander years where I started to go to school after graduating from high school. But in 1975, President Jimmy Carter, as part of an economic stimulus back then, created the CETA program, and 6 job openings for the position of police cadet, civilian police cadet, opened up. And I was fortunate enough to be one of the original 6. And one of the talents that I have is drawing. And sometimes people find it hard to believe that back then I was assigned to the Detective Bureau to do composite drawings. And I spent most of my cadet time in the Detective Bureau, with the exception of the time when I was assigned to Chief Richard Slate, and I became his administrative assistant and used to write speeches for him. And my dream would be to enter the force and become a police officer. And that happened in 1977, on March 21st, and I became a police officer. Back then, they didn't send you to an academy before they put you out in the street. And I ended up being on the streets of Pomona prior to going to the academy, and was involved in a shooting at San Antonio and Laverne. And in that shooting, one of the training officers that I was with accidentally shot a 10-year-old boy. And that would have a lasting impact on me, because I would pledge my career in the memory of Toby Reed, who died in that fateful accident. And that evening also showed me that police work wasn't going to be as easy that I had imagined. That single incident certainly changed the life of many people. And I would forever keep that in mind as I progressed through my career. I was fortunate enough to be the very youngest corporal to get promoted in the police department, and I progressed to the rank of sergeant and then lieutenant in 1990, and then was the first Hispanic to make captain in the city of Pomona. And I did about 13 years as a captain, working patrol, administrative services, and the detective bureau, and then made assistant chief under Chief James Lewis. And then when Chief Lewis left, I was fortunate enough to get the highest honor that I think that you can get in Pomona policing, and that's to become the chief of police. Some people ask how difficult chief of police was, and I would say that a chief job is one of the two difficult jobs in the world. Chief being second, and the wife of a chief being the toughest job in the world. And I've been very fortunate to have my wife Carolyn with me throughout my career from cadet on. And certainly as I talk about different remembrances of my career, she's behind the scenes. You know, I think if I was to share a couple of stories of the Pomona Police Department, one I have to share is when I was a cadet, I always thought, well, gee, I'd like to work undercover, I'd like to work vice. And I had that opportunity when I was a cadet. I think I was 19. I had my own car. It was a silver 260Z. And they asked me to pick up ladies in the night or street prostitutes. And right there on Mission Boulevard and Elm, which is not far from the police station or Civic Center, there used to be a gal who would walk up and down the streets plying her trade. And I pulled into the parking lot of a drugstore that used to be there, the old Hamilton's drugstore, and she really didn't want anything to do with me. And I sort of put my hand out my window, and I had a real fancy watch at the time. It was a Seiko digital, which was new for the time. And I sort of twisted my wrist a little bit to see if she would get the attention. And ultimately she came over. And we were making the deal and deciding price and things like that. And she's halfway in my car. And at that time I looked up and I can see two of my mother's friends walk out of the drugstore, and I could see them mouth the words, "Poor Laura," and sort of shake their head. And I had this sinking feeling. And that was my first experience. The second arrest was at Main and Holt by the old Bob's Big Boy. And as I approached, I thought, that is the tallest woman I have ever seen. And look at those thighs. Those thighs were as big as a thoroughbred. And I made the deal, got what Tina into the car, and as she got into my little 260Z, I looked down and I said, well, those are pretty big feet. And I noticed that her legs were touching the dashboard, and Tina sort of reached over and squeezed my bicep, and I said, well, that's a pretty strong woman. And it certainly wasn't my expectation as a young man to realize that men dress like women, and Tina really turned out to be Roger. So I had a love for going undercover, and even as chief, one of the stories that people tell in the community is me dressing like a wino and going out and posing and laying down and letting people take money from me so we could rob them. And it was one way to be proactive. And the first time that we did it was at Town Shop Liquor, and I posed as a drunk and went down, and it was just like a National Geographic special where the big ox lands, and then you could see on the surveillance video, the next thing you know, there was, you know, the first little vulture came, and then the jackal, then the hyenas, and then everybody else. And as they circled around me, they were stepping on me and pulling my ear, and I can hear them talking about take his shoes off, and they were trying to find out if I had a watch and like that. And they took the money. Well, part of the plan was for the takedown team to arrest the suspects once the crime had been committed, and then they were supposed to also arrest me, put me in a police car so I would be safe, and my cover would remain. And what happened is, since this was the first time that the team had done this, they arrested the suspects and they left me there lying and drove off. One of the things I'm proud about of our police department is police officers that are working for the Boys and Girls Club to inspire young people, or our GREAT program, which helps gang resistance and training. One of the things that police officers have banded together is to work for Special Olympics. And that's a proud moment for each one of the officers when they stand next to these Special Olympians and share momentous victories. And I think that if I learned anything as a young explorer, was to look up to police officers who had an impact. And certainly I think that if people look at 33 years of my law enforcement experience, I hope that they said that I had an impact. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to share a little bit of my story.